call folks to come join us.
Getting the guitar a little bit closer. I'm just handing you the guitar.
Let me see, do I have a... There we go. Let me turn this on. Gotta get used to this, how to do this. There we go. All right, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
How do you like that, by the way? New sound system after 30-something years. Sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good.
Shechianu.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully people who are still in the social hall can hear me, even though we're putting in the speakers on that side next week. And they'll join in with us. We're in Mishkan Tefillah Siddur, and we will start off by singing Hine Matov.
Hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, hine matov. Ya la ya la la la. Hine matov, hine matov. Ya la ya la la la. Hine matov u'manayim, ya la 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 la. Hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad.
We are going to turn to page 142 and sing Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi HaSharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi HaSharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi HaSharet, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedechem l'Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi
We'll turn back to page 138 and join together in singing Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, Likrakala, Pene Shabbat, Lekabela, Lecha Dodi, Likrakala, Pene Shabbat, Lekabela, Shamur v'zakur, b'diburecha, ishmi'an, el ha'meyuchad Adonai ושמו אחד, לשם תפארת והיתילה, לאחדודי לקרא קלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לאחדודי לקרא קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת תבואינך כי מקור המלאכה מראש מקדם נצוחה סוף מעשה ומחשבה קיבלה
להדודי לקרא קלה
פני שבת נקבלה להדודי לקרא קלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי כי בעורף קומי אורי שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלי נגלה לחגודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לחגודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה.
We rise and face the entrance to greet Shabbat.
באי בשלום, עטרה גם בשמחה ובצרה תחמונה על סגולה. באי חלה להדודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה להדודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה.
Now that we've taken a moment to greet Shabbat, let's take a moment and greet one another. And when you hear the music playing, that'll be our cue that we are coming back together. But introduce yourself to somebody, wish somebody a Shabbat Shalom, welcome them here.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, good to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, good to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. How are you doing? Shabbat Shalom, nice to be seen. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. A week from Sunday. So, they're sending me over to fix all the problems. Hey, how are you? It's been a while. Good to see you. How are your folks? Tell them I say hi. As we come back together, I'll invite you to be seated. I think we have a couple of people here this evening who've been a part of the Great Salt Lake, Save the Great Salt Lake Coalition. I know Helene Cuomo has been very involved in that. I would love to invite Helene, can I invite you to light our candles for us? You've been. Oh well, okay. I was trying to give you an honor. Can't win. Would somebody else from our Great Salt Lake Commission like to come forward and light our Shabbat candles for us? Anybody? If not, I'll do it. But Sue, welcome. Come on up, Sue. Thank you. Good to see you, Sue. Come on over here. Let's see. Oh, we gotta come up this way. It might be a little tough for you to get around the canter. Challenge. Everybody's got busted up legs right now. It's a problem.
You can move that if you need to.
Hey, how are you?
You can just move that out of the way. It's just a guitar stand. There you go. I'll move it back. That's okay.
Go ahead, Sue.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate you. We're going to turn to the Hatzi Kaddish on page 144.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה
Amen.
ויעמד יברך ילותי וימליך מלכותי וחייך ובימיך ובחייך בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב בימרו
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולם ימיה
Yitbarach.
יתברך וישתבח ויתברך ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי דקודשה
Rehu.
לילה מן ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירה מירמה ואימרוה
Amen. We rise for the Baruch Hu, our call to worship on page 146.
Yalai lai lai, 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 yalai lai lai. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Le'olam Yalai lai lai, 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 yalai lai lai.
You may be seated. We turn to page 148 and we will read the translation of the Ma'ariv Arvim together. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night, and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzivaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
Baruch atah Adonai, Hamari Aravi.
150.
Ahavat olam beit Yisrael, Amehaveta, Torah mitzvah, Chokim u'mishpatim, Ata limadita. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, B'shovreinu u'b'kumeinu, Nasiach b'chulkecha, V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, U'b'mitzvotecha le'alam va'ed. Ki הם חיינו ואורך ימינו והם נגד יומם ולילה. יעבדך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמי. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבת על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen.
One of my favorite midrashim in Judaism is how once our people were freed from slavery from Egypt, they danced and they sang. I got you. They danced and sang and cheered. And also the angels, when they started to see Pharaoh's army drowning and realizing that they weren't going to be able to save the people, be able to recapture the people of Israel, they started to cheer as well. But God stopped them. God stopped the angels from dancing and cheering and said, my creations are drowning in front of you, and you are celebrating? And for us as Jews, what we learn and what we realize is that we can celebrate our own accomplishments, but we don't cheer on the downfall of others. Instead, we have this beautiful faith that prays actively not only for our own redemption, but that every single person in the world, no matter their pathway to God, will one day be freed of whatever difficulties they have and will be granted a better tomorrow than their today. So with that spirit in mind, and with the prayers as well, you see in our back row here we have all these posters and also a chair here to keep in mind those who are currently being held hostage in Gaza. We pray for all those folks that one day soon they all will be redeemed as well and be able to be free and celebrate as our ancestors did long ago. Micha Mocha is on page 158.
Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la la. Sing with me. Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Mi chamocha vayni madonna, mi chamocha nedar bakosh darat gilah. מלכותך רעוב עליך, בקיים לפני משה ומרים. מלכותך רעוב עליך, בקיים משה ומרים. זיני אנו כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלה מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Turn to page 160 for the Hashkivenu.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים שלום מעתה ועד עולם. השיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכה Sukkot Shalom Aleinu, Habore Sukkot Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al kol amo Yisrael, Ve'al Yerushalayim.
Turn to Vishamru on the top of page 162.
Vishameru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat לעשות את השבת לדורתה בעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפל.
We rise for the Amidah on page 164.
Adonai, sefetai tifta, ufi yagi, tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotzeinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah. Ha'il ha'gadol ha'gibor v'hanora El Elyon, גומר חסדים הטובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחכה לחיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, איש עיני יפה. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידה מלך, מלך מימי ומחיי ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים לך היום, יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
This time I invite you to continue on your own silently. We're on page 172 and you can continue through page 180, or you can use this as an opportunity for your own private prayers and thoughts and reflections. And when you're finished, you may be seated.
Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'hivru amen. Yalla la 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 la, yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la. Aseh shalom b'mroman, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'hivru amen.
And now that we've done a prayer for peace, we'll read this prayer for the state of Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you prosper. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless this day of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel, and strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Let us say, Amen.
Amen.
We are going to turn now. Are we going to in the
And then, do
Siddur?
you have a booklet?
No.
Oh, then the Siddur it is.
So we'll turn to page 371 for our prayer for healing, the Mishaberach.
Mishaberach Avoteinu V'kol habracha le'imoteinu. May the source of strength to bless the ones before us help us find a courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
This week we think of these members of our community and their loved ones who could use a prayer for healing. Gedaliah bat Masha Hana, Harav Yehuda Leib ben Dina, Myron Yisrael ben Rachel, Daniel Meir ben Chaya Etia, Baruch ben Sarah, Itkafega bat Gittel, Bat Yachaya bat Sarah, Gila Chaya bat Mordechai Leib v'Gila Leah, Yosef Chaim ben Yael, Yehuda ben Hana, Tova Hava bat Chai Rochel, Ed Bronsky, David Dowsid, so nice to see you here, always keeping you in our prayers. Same with you, Angela Inno, nice to see you here as well. Yitzhak Vigilski, Mather Calm, Tanner Light, Megan Magleby, Kelly McGuire, Josh Shapiro, Penny Spector, Adina Stern, and Judy Wolf. And if you have a name to add, when I look in your direction, I'll invite you to share with us. Danny? Rochelle? Rochelle? Let's see. Who's that? Alex? Sue? And if you are watching our live stream, I'll invite you to share a name this time as well.
Mishaberach imoteinu Mekol habracha le'avoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for being here tonight for not only Shabbat, but also following our service. Representative Doug Owens is going to be talking to us about the efforts he's doing to save the Great Salt Lake. And by the way, I love that we have the Great Salt Lake here, because for most of my life, I was debating, do I want to live in Israel or do I want to live in America? And I feel like with living in Utah, I get a little bit of the best of both. I'm in America, and at the same time, this is America's Zion, and we have in it America's Dead Sea. And it's also in trouble, just like the Israeli Dead Sea. And ironically, on this evening that we are bringing Representative Owens here to talk about this, we're in the Torah portion. It's funny how these things work out. where the Dead Sea is created. And it doesn't explicitly say that, but basically, when we get an explanation rabbinically of how is it that there's this sea that is so salty that everything floats in it. Like you cannot sink in the Dead Sea. How did that come to be? How is that possible? Well, the Torah alludes to that this week. Because this week what we have in our Torah portion is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, a couple families were deemed righteous enough to be able to leave and to not perish in the destruction. Of course, Abraham and Sarah, and then also Abraham's nephew and his kids, his nephew Lot, and also Lot's wife. Now, have you ever met someone? I certainly know a bunch of folks like this where one person in the couple is just awesome, great human being, super nice, super kind, and then there's their spouse, and you're like, what happened there? That person's a complete dud, and that person's awesome. People say that about Jill, though. They're like, what was she doing, that guy? But we've all met those folks before, those couples, where there's just one person in the couple that we really like, and the other person we just, no, we don't. That was basically Lot and his wife. Lot was a great guy. His wife, not so much. And according to Torah, what we read is that as Sodom and Gomorrah were being destroyed, Lot's wife, as they were leaving the city, turned around to watch and saw the destruction after they had all been explicitly told, do not turn around. And she is turned into a pillar of salt. And in fact, if you drive through past the Dead Sea today, there's a sign that points to this 90-foot pillar of salt that is called the Lot's wife's pillar, and says that's where she's at. That's the pillar. How accurate that is, I'm not sure, but that is supposedly why this Dead Sea is that salty. And Lot's wife, why? Why did she turn around? There's two explanations that are often given. One is, again, that she was a pretty wicked person herself. Neither explanation is particularly flattering to her. One is that she was a wicked person herself, and she wanted to turn back and go back to Sodom and Gomorrah to be with her fellow terrible people. And the other explanation that's often given is that she turned around because she was taking joy in the fact that all those people were perishing and she got to survive and wanted to watch their misery. And so if we take that second reason for Lot's wife doing this, that's an example of what is called Schadenfreude. It's a German term. Schaden means harm, and Freud means joy. Joy from harm. And that is that feeling that we get when we feel joy at somebody else's misery. We've all felt that way perhaps at some time. When maybe the person we didn't vote for in the election not only loses but gets crushed or something like that in the election. Or I actually saw an example of Schadenfreude today. If you are like me, and I don't like to say I hate anyone. I hate the Houston Astros. It is a baseball team I absolutely hate. And I get tremendous joy when the Houston Astros lose. And the Houston Astros have been trailing the American League West Division for the whole year. And then on the last day, after having won this division every year for the last 6 years, and then on the last day, they won the division. And in their post-game celebration, nice Jewish boy who plays for the team, Alex Bregman, said to all of his teammates, everybody asked, what's going to happen if the Houston Astros don't win the division? I guess we'll never know. And that went viral of him kind of taunting everybody else. Well, today, at the Texas Rangers, their division rivals, had a celebration for their winning the World Series in Arlington today. And their star player, Corey Seager, who won the World Series MVP, he was asked to give a speech. And he said, well, I really only have one thing to say, which is, people asked, what are they going to say if the Texas Rangers don't win the World Series? I guess we'll never know. And it was his way of giving a direct taunt to Alex Bregman, the Houston Astros, and all their fans, and letting them know not only his joy in having won the World Series, but his complete joy at the fact that the Houston Astros lost the World Series. Well, didn't even go to the World Series. That's an example of Schadenfreude. And so, this is something we've all experienced at times. And sadly, though, we have seen this too when Jewish people have moments of misery, that it brings other people joy. And we saw that this past month on October 7th. We saw Palestinians celebrating. We saw Hezbollah releasing statements about how great this massacre was, and same with the Ayatollahs in Iran. And sadly, that's what was expected. I knew they would do that. But we even saw people all over the world who claim to be sympathizers to the Palestinian cause. And I wonder if they really sympathize with Palestinians, or if it's that they hate the Israelis so much that they were celebrating too. And we even saw that here in Salt Lake City, with a group of people, the day of the massacre, waving Palestinian flags downtown and cheering. And the group, as an example of this, the college student group, Students for Justice in Palestine, at the Ohio State University, said on their Facebook, today, October 7th, 2023, an unprecedented series of events has taken place, led by our heroic resistance in Gaza, has shown the world again that the spirit of the Palestinian people will not be trampled, and that our resistance to Zionism and Western imperialism remains strong. We call on our people of Columbus, Ohio, to uplift and honor our resistance and our martyrs. Now, I'm not going to get into exactly what Hamas did, because most of you already know. If you don't know, just imagine the worst things you can do to any human being, and that's what was done, including to babies, elderly people. And I cannot understand how anybody would find joy in that, or celebrate that. Or if you were a sympathizer of the Palestinian cause, not feel tremendous heartbreak and pain and betrayal and disappointment at the savagery of what occurred. That's, to anybody at all who's human should be sickened by what happened on October 7th. But it reminds me, in contrast, we don't see in mass Jewish people or Israelis celebrating the misery of the Palestinians. We don't. We don't see people who support Israel celebrating hate, celebrating death and destruction. That's not in our DNA. Because it even says in the Bible, in Proverbs 24, I believe it is, do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. And so for us, in the midst of this war, where I certainly am praying for Israel to have a strong victory, and for Hamas to be eliminated as a threat, we're reminded by Schadenfreude that Lot's wife feels and experiences, that we cannot and we should not ever celebrate or receive joy from the deaths of any Palestinians, especially innocent children. We cannot lose our sense of humanity in all this. Because if we do, we will lose this war. But more so than that, we'll lose the essence of what it means to be Jewish. And that will enable our own fate to be like that of Lot's wife and lead to our own destruction. So rather, we must pray that the end result of this war will be that our people will never have to again go to war in Gaza. That the people of Israel and the Palestinians will both have better futures, and that we will both be made more successful. And that lo yisagoy al goy Erev, lo yumadu od milchama. That nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and neither should they know war anymore. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
I want to thank you, Cantor, and I want to thank and acknowledge our staff as well that I see here this evening, our Executive Director, Danny Berman, and I know somewhere around here is our Program Director, Galit Livne, who's worked awfully hard in putting this evening together. And also a big thank you, of course, as always, to Salt Lake City Police Department for being here, keep us safe. And I see that Representative Owens just came in. We'll get to you in just a little bit, and we're so honored to have you here, and appreciative of your service to our community, and look forward to hearing you tonight. And I also want to acknowledge and thank our board members who I see here this evening as well. I see Larry Green, Dove DeLay. Dove, thank you, and Beth as well for a wonderful dinner this evening, and anybody else who helped out. I don't want to leave anybody out, but thank you as always. And also I see Cheryl Palmer and Gary Lappin, And any board members I missed, I'm always, oh, Faye Lincoln back there, good to see you, Faye. And yeah, any other board members I didn't see, I always don't want to miss anybody. Well, thank you all for your leadership to our community. Would one of you like to come up here and make some announcements of upcoming events in our community? Cheryl, come on up.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you to Rabbi Spector and Cantor Brown Levy for leading us this evening. Thank you to all who joined us for our Shabbat dinner before our service. Immediately following our service, please stay as Utah State Representative Doug Owens provides an update on what is happening with the Great Salt Lake, including why it is drying up, what the consequences are, and what is being done to preserve it, and measures we can take to preserve the lake for the future. Save the date for these other upcoming events. KG is having a SIGD, event.
Ethiopian holiday. It's a holiday specific to the Ethiopian Jewish community.
This Sunday, November 5th, there will be a Kiddush in honor of Lois Spiegel's 90th birthday on November 11th, following our Shabbat services. Please make sure to RSVP. The next religious school parent meet and greet is on November 12th. The Rosh Chodesh Women's Group Jewish Mindfulness through Yoga and Meditation is on November 14th. Shir Shabbat and the Shabbat dinner is on November 17th. There will be a Kiddush in memory of Susan Litvak on the 18th. And that night, join us for a trivia night fundraiser supporting the Religious School Scholarship Fund on November 18th. Babysitting is available for kids in kindergarten through 7th grade. And our Bring in the Light Hanukkah concert, December 10th. Tickets are on sale now. The deadline to submit ads and greetings for the program is December 1st. In partnership with Mill Creek Business Council, we are collecting coats, hats, scarves, winter boots, and new socks now through November 30th. Bins are located in the lobbies. Rabbi Spector is leading a trip to Atlanta and Alabama, April 4th through 7th, 2024, to learn about the civil rights movement and the Jewish role in it. This trip is open to Kol Me members ages 60 plus. I fit that group. There will be an information session on Zoom at 6 p.m. on November 27th. Please contact the rabbi for more information. Also, the rabbi is going to Israel November 14th through 21st. And will be providing daily updates from Israel and will be volunteering to help those affected by the current war. He's accepting notes to give to Israeli soldiers, as well as donations to his discretionary fund to be donated to organizations on the ground helping those in need. Please donate to our High Holiday Appeal. Kol Me is thriving because of you. To continue our growth and help upgrade our security, we depend on this appeal. Please give as much as you can. We appreciate every donated dollar. Thank you to our volunteers, donors, members, and guests for your participation and support. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. In case you didn't hear the beginning, hopefully you are hearing now, loud and clear. Phase 1 of our new sound system got put in this week, and I think it's a lot better. No dead zones and stuff. Hopefully y'all can hear me pretty well. No buzz, no crackling or anything. And next week they're going to do phase 2 in the social hall and multi-purpose rooms. That's really exciting. A lot of exciting stuff going on here at Kol Me, and that's largely due to all of your support. Thank you. We are going to move into the concluding part of our service with the Aleinu on page 586 at the bottom of the page, and I'll invite you to please rise.
Kimi ולמה מהיד עוני תראה על הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
You may be seated. This time we think of those of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, and those who have died in this season years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. If you hear the name of a loved one, you're invited to rise upon hearing their name. In the period of Shloshim, 30-day period of mourning, we remember Ann Lozier, a local Jewish person laid to rest in our cemetery, and also Howard Saul Carney, a relative of Jerry and Gordon Siegel, Joseph Levi, fiance of Naira Milhomans, and Daniel Lewis Grosser, brother of Bernard Grosser and uncle of Mark Grosser. And also we think, and our condolences, by the way, Mark, to your family. And we also think, of course, of all those who so needlessly lost their lives on October 7th in Israel, and those who have died defending the state of Israel in the past month. And this week, we commemorate these Yortzites' anniversary of the passing of these loved ones. Ruth Avner, Tom Barlow, Regina Benowitz, Gussie Bernstein, Dorothy Bernstein, Erwin Edward Berry, Harry Bontsick, Jake Cohen, Michael Falk, Muriel Fessinger, Sarah Goldenstein, Edward Goldstein, Isidore Gottlieb, Rose Hintelef, Bernard Jaffe, Beatrice Sabrina Kaplan, Paul Krasny, Sophia Kluber, Carol Landa, Ann Leviton, Esther Levine, Maury Levy, Edward Lipson, Joseph Livingston, Mosey Leon Marks, Sam Mitchell, Emmanuel M. Manny Pepper, Betty Poff, Hy Rudd, Molly Shapiro, Ben Zion Schreiber, Alexander Haim Solomon, Bernard Stegman, Edna Levy Tannenbaum, Amelia K. Turner, David Lewis Weiss, and Vasya Zabernia. And if you have a name to add, I'll invite you to share with our community. And if you are observing a yard site or in Shloshim and you're on our live stream, I'll invite you to share your name as well. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. If you're in mourning, or is your tradition to do so, you're invited to rise. We're on page 598. Yitkadah v'yikadash shemei rabbah, ve'alma divrach hirutei v'yemlech malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudisha b'rechu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tishbechata v'nehemata, da'amiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Uyaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who are mourning comfort the bereaved among us. Can we say amen?
Amen.
And we are going to conclude, as we have been throughout this war, with Israel's national anthem, Hatikva. I'll invite you to please rise.
God, Aleinu, Yerushalayim.
We'll remain standing for Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri agafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodesho v'yahava v'ratzon ninchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishim. כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש. זכר יציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת אותנו, קידשת בקרים. בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. אמן. לחיים.
And we have here, as always, wonderful challah made by our good buddy Moshe over there. If you'll join in with us.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz v'te'avon.
Te'avon. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. If you
Shabbat
are
Shalom.
staying for our presentation, you're welcome to have a seat. If you're not, you're welcome to leave. But I hope you stay. Thank you all for being here this evening. All right, if we could have a seat if you're staying, folks. All right. The schmoozing minion will meet out in the hallway. Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening for, schmoozing minion. All right. No, I gave it to Dove. Dove's over there. All right. All right, that's fine. Okay. So, we're here tonight for a really important topic, obviously, which is the Great Salt Lake. And not too long ago, on CNN, the headline it was about the dangers of the Great Salt Lake disappearing. Now, my brother, who does not live here in Utah, guys, come on, thank you. My brother, who doesn't live here in Utah, called me about a week later. He said, "Hey, did you hear this thing about the Great Salt Lake disappearing?" And I said, "You mean, did I hear the thing about how the town I live in will turn into a complete toxic wasteland and kill anybody who stays if they don't get out?" Yeah, I think I heard something about that. This is a big problem, obviously. And we're very fortunate because, despite all that, we're very fortunate that representing our synagogue, we have somebody who is really working to address this problem. And, for a long time, our congregant, Patrice Arendt, was the representative for this district and represented our own synagogue, which was wonderful and great. And when Patrice announced her well-deserved retirement, I think a lot of us had a lot of worry and concern, especially in a time of rising anti-Semitism, of who's going to be our voice now, who's going to speak up for the Jewish community. And nobody could have filled those giant shoes better than my friend, Representative Doug Owens, who has been a wonderful, wonderful champion for Jewish people and for combating anti-Semitism in the Utah legislature, and is now also, in addition to advocating for us and being an advocate against hate and bias against anyone in all forms, has been a leader in trying to save the Great Salt Lake. So without further ado, I want to invite our congregation's representative to the Utah State Legislature, the Utah State House of Representatives, Representative Owens, to please join us. And I don't know if you heard at the beginning of my sermon, but I mentioned that we have America's Dead Sea here, and this weekend happens to be the Torah portion where the Dead Sea was created. So this all worked out pretty perfectly. So please, my friend, good to see you. Thank you for being with us and all your work. Please do. Yeah, wherever you want, wherever's comfortable.
I'll just stand down here. It feels better to me, but it's nice to be with you. Thank you, Rabbi, for that kind introduction, and it's nice to see such a big crowd here.
He also makes a great sourdough bread. Go on.
That's my son. Yes, my son is the baker. But how long should I take? 20 minutes and then questions or something like that? Okay, so we'll hurry. But you invited me here to speak about the lake, but I can't begin with this community without saying something else first, which is that I wish Israel every success in its current endeavors. It's really part of a life and death struggle. The President of the United States has spoken firmly for me when he's spoken on this topic. And I was very touched when I heard him say speak his recollection of talking to Prime Minister Golda Meir back in the 70s, and her saying that we have a secret weapon in this struggle, which is that we have nowhere else to go. I'm very mindful of that struggle and mindful of the current political situation, and so I hope that success comes quickly and that peace and stability gets restored quickly. I'm also mindful of that anti-Semitism situation here at home, and I've worked hard on that issue. We got the anti-Semitism condemnation resolution through a couple of years ago. Now working with Dr. Jay Jacobson and others, including law enforcement, on a reporting system for acts of hostility that don't amount to crimes. I think it's important that we track that, and law enforcement agrees with that. Also another bill to ban the display of hate symbols on any kind of state property. So I hope we get those things through this year. I expect to be able to do it in the next session. So anyway, thank you for your support on that. I do spend most of my time as a legislator, now in my third year, on Great Salt Lake issues. As the rabbi mentioned, it's really akin to a nuclear bomb issue. He didn't say those words, but it is a really life and death issue for us here in Salt Lake City along the Wasatch Front. In my second session up on the Hill, I was able to get, can you hear me? Is this working okay? I got the entire legislature up on Army helicopters right from Capitol Hill to go look at the situation. Thank you, Ro. And it was really important to see that. Antelope Island no longer being an island, all the marinas being half a mile from any water, and other similar signs of the times. But I want to just lay a little bit of groundwork so you can sense the scope of the problem, and then we'll talk about solutions. What we have is an almost unique situation here in the West, where we have not only the normal problems of drought and water scarcity, but we also have a terminal lake at the end of the situation where we've got to keep that terminal lake alive. If it dies, we're in big trouble. So I'd like to just give you a little bit of the parameters down about that. The lake is down about 11.5 feet, or was at its worst point 1 year ago this month, was down 11.5 feet from its normal average elevation of 4,200 feet. we came up in the spring 5.5 feet almost, and now down a couple of feet. So we're up 3.5 feet from the all-time low last year, which sounds good, but we're still way, way down. We're still eight or more feet down from where the average of the lake has been since records have been kept. The lake sort of respires in a way. It has a fill cycle in the winter and spring, and then it evaporates over the summer and into the early fall. And so it goes up, and then it goes down. And so we hope that those up cycles outweigh the down cycles. It's important to remember when I say we're up 3.5 feet from a year ago, that's not going to fix the problem. 1 year is not going to be the solution. It's really like a shallow dish. The deepest that lake ever gets is 33 feet. So even though it's the size of Delaware, it never gets deeper than 33 feet. So it's very large, and it's really like a dish. And so evaporating a little bit of water makes the lake shrink, and we've got a lot of exposed lake bed, and that presents the human health issue. At the worst point a year ago, there was 800 square miles of exposed lake bed that was shedding dust, or had the potential to shed dust in wind events. And now, even with the 3.5 feet additional, we've probably only covered up 10 or 20% of that exposed lake bed. It puts out not only arsenic, which is a carcinogen at levels when there's a dust storm. You can kind of tell it's not happening all the time. It's really with big dust events, storms. Not in the winter when it's wet, but in the summer when it's dry. If you see dust coming from the west, you're better off putting on a mask and filtering your PM10 and your PM2.5. Jay, I hope I'm getting this right, Dr. Jacobson. So you can see the problem, you can smell it and taste it actually too. The whole Wasatch Front is at risk. This is not limited to any particular part of the Wasatch Front. Those storm events go many different directions, predominantly from the west to the east, but also to the north and south as they go east. The dust is a compounding issue as well, because if it gets up in the mountains in the early spring, it will coat the snow with a dark layer, which then precipitates quicker melting of the snow, which, we want to have what we call efficient runoff, where we capture as much of the moisture in the mountains as possible to get into the river system and get to the lake. But if the runoff is quick, it diminishes the ability to do that. So the dust on the snow is also a problem. I've worked on this lake bed issue. We got legislation through successfully to ban vehicles on the lake bed. People like to drive these new side-by-sides at 80 miles an hour. And I got a bill through to keep them off the lake bed, and actually a full-time law enforcement officer to keep them off the lake bed, because they churn up that dust underneath the salt pan. There's a naturally protective salt pan that keeps the dust down. That's just a sort of sampling of the issues relating to the lake bed. The ecological damage that would come with losing the lake is catastrophic as well. For those of us who watch every David Attenborough special that was ever put out on wildlife, I love those birds out there. There's 13 million migrating birds through that corridor every year. This is the big oasis in the entire North American continent. This is the most significant flyway, the most significant oasis, the most significant food and water source for these birds on these amazing journeys they take. 13 million migratory birds, 300 species. And if you haven't spent time on the lake, you really should take advantage of the Bear River Bird Refuge, Antelope Island, other things. I grew up here and never cared much about it. To be honest, we didn't talk much about it. There were always more dramatic things in the mountains or the southern Utah. And it's only been the last 10 years where I've started to appreciate the West Desert and this amazing lake. So, amazing life concentrated there. So we've talked about elevation. The other factor you got to take account of is salinity. So that's the one that's most directly tied to whether this lake is staying viable biologically for the animals. So the ideal salinity out on the lake is about 12%. And that compares to the ocean, which is about 3.5%. If it gets up to 15%, it starts to stress the brine flies, which are the basis for the food chain. At 20%, they'll start to die off. A year ago summer, we got to 19+%, and we started to see dramatic diminishments of the fly and brine shrimp populations. The brine shrimp get stressed, the flies get stressed. And in fact, a year ago summer, the fly population was down dramatically. But they have rebounded robustly, and confirming that the main policy objective that we got to pursue is adding water to the lake. This is not rocket science. We just have to add water to the lake, and Mother Nature will take care of the rest. Birds also are bothered by excessive salt. They spend energy secreting salt, and so it makes them go under stress. They have to travel farther to find fresh water. The food is not as nutritious when those flies get smaller. So that's sort of the biology of the lake. It's interesting, the history is that the lake in 1959, the old trestle that carried the railroad across, was converted to a rock berm. So there's now, it really essentially divided the lake in two in 1959. And there was an opening, I think several in fact, but they were closed a year ago, summer, 18 months ago or so, to keep the south part of the lake less saline than the north. And I mentioned those percentages of ideal salinity. The north arm is at saturation. It's over 30%. It cannot absorb any more salt. If it gets more salt, it drops out of solution. So it's biologically dead, other than that weird pink bacteria that likes that hypersaline situation, but otherwise has no biology going up there at all. And that's half the lake. So it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing part is that we can, while we're trying to get our act together to take care of this lake, we can take care of the half on the south arm that before we can open up the solution to the whole lake, and we can keep the biological viability in that southern portion. I think it's been a strange blessing in a way that this action taken in 1959 has turned out to make the problem more manageable in the short term. All right, so we've got two lakes essentially. The south arm is the viable arm. 3 rivers go into that. No rivers go into the north arm. And then there's this berm that had an opening because the theory used to be they wanted that hypersaline to mix and to equalize. But that was never adequate, and it was closed a year ago summer, the governor by executive order to keep the fresh water, to husband it and take care of it in the south, use it in the south arm to preserve the economic viability. There's also economic consequences. There's a $1.2 billion mineral extraction activity. Also the brine shrimp, half the brine shrimp used to feed commercial fisheries around the world, the fish farms basically. Half that food comes out of the Great Salt Lake in the form of brine shrimp cysts. Also, the fertilizer, basically, if you have grown nuts in North America, you have used fertilizer out of the Great Salt Lake. There's some micronutrients that are essential for the fruit industry. Fruit and nuts, I should say, the kind of fruit with pits in it. Ro will know what I'm talking about. She's a gardener. You all know that better than I do. But also birding, boating, and so forth, recreational usage. All right, why is it shrinking? So there's a study that was done a year ago, or not even a year ago, back in February, the Great Salt Lake Strike Team that was an assemblage of all the trusted academic and basically sort of quietly political voices that were trusted to come up with an understanding of the situation. And it said that between 67 and 73%, so give or take 70% of the problem, was human caused. The actual precipitations levels had not been trending downward. And the other notable thing is that 10%, give or take a point, was due to increased evaporation from higher temperatures, 3 degrees higher in Utah over the last 40 years. So we get more evaporation. And actually the predictions are Utah with global warming, it's really global weirding. It's not global warming per se. You get all these kind of weird impacts of the average temperature increasing. And Utah is actually expected to get more precipitation with global warming, but it will come in the form of rain, which is not as useful for protecting our water infrastructure, for filling our water infrastructure, and less will come as snow. It's really the snow that makes the most efficient runoff. We get a higher percentage of a drop, an inch of snow than we do from an equivalent amount of water in the form of rain. All right, so what is disheartening is also encouraging, because what has a human cause can also have a human solution. And so we know that we need to start pulling some policy levers about human use. And so let me just give you a couple more numbers. I'm sorry, people's eyes aren't glazing over. I thought you'd glaze over a little more, but 61%, you hear higher numbers statewide, but in the basin of the Great Salt Lake we're going to talk about, 61.5% is used for agriculture, human diversion, okay? Depletion, I should say. 9% for residential usage. And here's a killer fact that you should take away as urban dwellers, if you're urban dwellers, this will be of interest. When you take water into your house, that water goes back out. 95% of it, the studies say, goes back out of your house to a sewage treatment plant and to the lake. The Jordan River, one of the 3 tributaries to the south arm of the lake in summertime, is 100% treated sewage. So don't go swimming in the Jordan River. No, that's not right? Oh, yeah, it's startling. Yeah, in the winter it's not, but in the summer, 100% treated sewage, and the Salt Lake does great at neutralizing biological pollutants that may remain there. They're supposed to be pretty clean by the time it goes in there, but so water, and the people using water is not a big drain on the water supply. It's your yards, okay? 100% depletion of what goes out onto your yard is gone. It does not go deep enough to get into the groundwater and help the lake. It does not evaporate and make rain. The only part that actually helps the lake is the part you shouldn't be putting into the storm drain that gets down. That will go to the lake, but you're overshooting your grass and you shouldn't do that. So we need to get, and half of that 9% residential, I want to get this right, yeah. Of the 9% residential usage, 5% is outdoor water use, 4% is indoor use, okay? So where we can have one lever, which is not the biggest piece here, ag is obviously, because I said 61%. But for us urban dwellers, we need to do better at our yards. And so I've been trying to get ordinances in place in municipalities, get the state to push municipalities to insist on water efficient landscaping when we do new construction. You'd think this would be a no-brainer, but it's a brainer. And we're having a hard time getting some municipalities. Almost half the municipalities in the drainage of the Great Salt Lake still do not require water efficient landscaping on new construction. So working on that issue. 8% of the water in the drainage of the Great Salt Lake is used on for mineral extraction. And the state has been very active last year and now to get the mineral industry, extraction industry, to use osmotic, non-depleting measures to use non-depleting tools to extract the minerals rather than evaporative usage. And that's been a tooth and nail fight. But the problem is we're stuck with these complexities from this water system going back, almost 200 years in the West, first and right, and these companies have enormous water rights, and they're extremely, they can be condemned, but they have to pay valid, just compensation, and the numbers are astronomical and not affordable. So we're having to turn to regulation, and it's not easy. And those are actually critical minerals. 100% of the United States production of magnesium comes from U.S. magnesium. So these are, and that's much in demand, and China and Russia are the other big suppliers. So there's strategic need for these things. Very complex. There's a running joke in water. The water world, well, it's complicated. People will always revert to that. There's all kinds of competing values. All right. So total human depletion is about 2 million acre feet a year. And of that, the projections are we need to find at least 600,000 acre feet to stop being diverted and depleted, I should say. It's different when you take water and because sometimes it goes back in the system. So that's a diversion. A depletion is when you take water and it's gone, okay? So we need to find 600,000 acre feet of depletion and convert that into lake water. And this is an achievable goal with the ag. The ag water quantities are enormous. And the challenge is that these are not, it's not just a policy decision to take water from alfalfa and put it in the lake. These people own the water. And much as the rabbi took a number of Utah leaders a few months back and toured Israel's water infrastructure, I think it was part of your visit if I understood correctly. There's one water owner in Israel. It's the state, and it can apportion the water, is my understanding. In Utah, we have 200,000 owners of water rights. And so people will look at farmers and say, why don't you just quit that ag and quit that? But they own the water, and we really can't afford to just buy it. So we need to work with them to achieve policies that will fix the issue. There are singular large water owners in the state who have indicated a willingness to be part of it, and I think it's heartening. The LDS Church contributed 20,000 acre feet, which by that 600,000 acre feet number is 3% of the solution in one fell swoop, and they also have indicated they're going to make many other gifts of similar size. So I think that's encouraging. All right, so on to policy changes. In the last 2 years, when I've been up there, there have been a lot of policy changes that were incorporated. The two biggest ones were requiring secondary water systems to be metered, which means when you, not so much in Salt Lake County, but if you're up in Davis or Weber, some parts of Utah County, the old style was you paid for your culinary water coming in the house, and then you had a secondary system, sometimes a ditch, but sometimes pressurized in a pipe that you could use for your taking care of your yard and your outside usage if you didn't need culinary. That typically was paid for with a flat fee, usually $75 or $100, and you got all the water you wanted. And there were people who would turn the sprinklers on all summer and they'd never go off, and it didn't cost them a nickel. So the state mandated and actually paid for meters for every pressurized water user in the state. It was $250 million, because studies had shown if people just know how much they're using, they'll cut their use by almost 40%, even without charging them a nickel, because they just take awareness of the problem. They didn't know. People don't take awareness when they don't know what they're using. And so that is well underway. It's mostly accomplished. Eventually, that will set up a system where the water suppliers can begin to charge. That the expectation is within 5 years, people will then now begin to be charged for that water, which is an important thing. Pricing, of course, everybody is price sensitive to some extent, and we want greater price sensitivity. 2/3 of our municipal water usage is subsidized through property tax. We only pay 1/3 of our water usage as municipal users is actually directly paid for the water. So those subsidies have economic consequences, and they push people to use a subsidized product. So I think that needs to change. But the important thing to remember with that pricing is that it's not going to impact the ag water issue, because those folks own the water. They do not pay to use the water. They own the right. So at least that's the system that we've got. All right. So the other biggest program that was done in the last 2 years is a dramatic expansion of agriculture optimization projects, where the state will go to a farm and say, hey, we'll pay 50% of your project if you can demonstrate it's going to use a certain amount of water less. So they'll pair up with the farmer, just to pick an example. Each one puts in $25,000. They irrigate a field more efficiently. The water has freed up, the project has freed up half the water that was going to be used on the field, let's say. And so the members of the public have been assuming that if that was the case, then that 50% of the water savings that would go back to the stream and would stay there and go to the lake. Well, you have an ugly surprise, because the water usage, the state expenditure never required any of that water to stay in the stream. So the farmer could say, wow, thanks state for that $25,000. I never had enough water before to irrigate my other field. Now I will irrigate my other field. Or the downstream user could say, wow, my water right was only on paper. I never had enough water in the stream to irrigate my field. Now, thanks to the upstream water optimization, the irrigation optimization project, I now have enough water to irrigate my field. So we really have not had a very good idea of the effect of these water optimization projects, and that's a disturbing thing, and that needs to change. And that is a very important project. It's very complicated. It's opposed by farmers for the state to take ownership of water that they pay for. There's a big audit that'll be coming out from the Legislative Audit Office next month, or sometime this month now, it's November, that will be, I think, quite critical of the state's water expenditures. They've been enormous, $200 million last year. And we're on to something. We can have ag. There are amazing sort of capital-intensive farming techniques that are pioneered all over the world now that we're going to be able to keep our ag production, but we can do it with a tenth or 5% of the water that we have used historically. You can produce alfalfa with 5% of the water that we used to use, same amount of alfalfa, but they're capital intensive. And so it's clearly a model we need to approach to use to keep our ag alive. All right, sorry for I get hyperventilating about these things. I get kind of excited because these things are how I spend my time, but they do create great complexities. So we also went after the mineral extraction companies last year. There is now a salinity trigger for if we get below a certain amount, they have to stop or greatly curtail their usage and push it, and there's incentives pushing them to do the non-evaporative techniques. All right, so what can we do now? There's other things that were done, and we can get into that if you want to, but I'm trying to shorten this up. For this year, I mentioned we've got to commit conserved water to the lake, and that's, I would say, one of the two big priorities for this year. When we've paid for the conservation, let us please put that water in the lake. Part of the problem there is we don't even have the capacity to measure it. So if you said to the farmer, hey, we paid you this dough for that optimization project, can we have the water? And the farmer said, yeah, you can, if you can show me that it'll get to the lake and not get diverted by the downstream user. And the state is not able to show that farmer that water can be shepherded, is the term that's commonly used, and actually show it arriving at the lake. He'll assume, rightly, that it'll probably get diverted downstream. So one of the initiatives this year is to do a I use the word gold-plated, but really it's just a world-class system to shepherd that water. We don't have sufficient metering, telemetry, we don't have sufficient personnel in the state engineer's office. That's a big initiative this year, to be able to shepherd the water so that we can commit conserved water to the lake. Also, more curtailment of mineral extraction. You've probably seen some news about that. Whether existing permits allow the extraction of lithium is an ongoing issue. I've been focusing on a little quiet issue. Phragmites is it a big invasive species that probably uses up 75,000 acre-feet a year. I'm trying to get the state to move from a 15-year window to eradicate that invasive species to a 5-year window, which could put about 35,000 of that used up 75,000 acre-feet into the lake. That would be a big savings and probably the cheapest low-hanging fruit there is. The other big piece that has to be accomplished this year, and this is what I spend most of my time on right now, is a bill to get late season water from our ag users to the lake. So you might, if you were driving around about 2 weeks ago in a rural area in Utah, you would have seen farms with those big broadcasting sprinklers with icicles hanging on them, broadcasting water, because farmers are exhausting their water rights, because it has been from time immemorial that you must use up your water right or you will lose it. So they're wasting it, because to not waste it is to lose it. And so there are changes, but they're complicated, and most farmers don't understand how they can do that, can save it, so they waste it. And there's no economic validity to it other than the preservation of the water right. So we need to change that and have a system where the third and fourth cuttings of alfalfa, where a lot of farmers are not interested in it economically late in the season, will be willing to lease that water to the state on a short-term basis. But there's administrative headaches that have to be fixed, and there's a system that has to be put in place. So those are the two big initiatives, the leasing of ag water and the other one I mentioned. I won't rehearse it. All right, so other things are really fighting the diversion of the damming of the Bear River. That is the last river that's even reasonably free-flowing and doesn't have a full-blown dam across it. We need to prevent that, and that means our urban users have to cut back. And people have traditionally just not, because the M&I municipal and industrial usage is so low, people have not really paid attention to that. But if we don't fix that lawn issue, we are going to have to dam the Bear River to supply culinary usage along the Wasatch Front, and we need to stop that. So with that, I'm going to stop, but that's an overview. I will mention one other thing, and that is Federal Endangered Species Act listing for some of the birds. You know, I mentioned those 300 species. A few of those, including the eared grebes and the Wilson's phalarope, are highly dependent on this locale. If the lake dried up, those species would likely go extinct. Huge populations are dependent for long periods of time for reproduction and migration success. And so if there was a listing, the knee-jerk reaction among Utah leaders is to say that would be a bad thing, but it has a lot of potential upsides, which is because the whole Central Utah Water Project system, which now supplies half the water from the Colorado Basin over to the Wasatch Front, and much of it is used for agriculture. That water, the federal government can decide, no, we're not going to give that to the farmers anymore, that's going to go to the lake. So that has a lot of potential if the state can't get its act together. But frankly, I've seen a strong willingness on a bipartisan basis up on the Hill to get our act together and make sure we do our best to take care of the lake. So I'm optimistic about the future. I think we have enough lead time, and it's not a lost cause. This is not rocket science. It's cooperation and intelligence and getting the work done. So thank you for inviting me tonight. Did I keep that at 20 minutes? How bad was it? Yes, Rabbi.
So you mentioned the trade mission that we went on last year with the governor and Joel Ferry, the chairman of the
Natural Resource Department. Yeah. Oh.
Thanks. Representative Owens mentioned the trade mission we went on last year with Joel Ferry, the commissioner on the natural resources for the state of Utah, and also, of course, the governor and a lot of representatives and state senators. One of the things I was hoping for from that trade mission was both California and Arizona have created MOUs with memorandums of understanding with Israel for water preservation, since Israel has found a way to overcome drought and it creates a surplus of water. That certainly, drought's been a major issue here. But also, in addition to our drought challenges, Israel has experienced similar problems to what we're experiencing with the Great Salt Lake, with both the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, and are trying to tackle that issue. Is there any joint cooperation or opportunity for cooperation or MOUs with the Israelis in terms of or the Jordanians who share the Dead Sea with saving the Great Salt Lake?
That's a great question, and sadly, I was not invited on that trade mission, and I'm not bitter about it at all. And I wish I could speak more directly to that, Rabbi. That's a great question, and I'll be looking into that. I don't know that off the top of my head. I know we have a lot of unique situations. Oh, do they? Oh, okay. I'll be asking about that. Yeah. I know we had really sharp people. Candace Hasenjager, who runs the Department of Water Resources. Joel is he was a great colleague in the House before he went to DNR. They are really thoughtful, well-intentioned people, and I know they went on that trip, and I'll be asking that question. Thank you.
What effect will the inland port have on the water supply as far as the future goes? Most of the buildings there are very long, and they have about 20 loading docks, maybe a few less. I've been out there a few times, and I don't know how many buildings there are, but they're planning on building more of them. I wonder how that's going to affect the water and the quality of the air here.
No good will come of that environmentally, I don't think. And it's mainly an air issue is the predominant problem there, but it's been a ship without a rudder, that project. I think they've had a real hard time staying focused on what it's supposed to do, and hopefully it will die of its own inertia. I don't think the legislature will help it die any more than they I don't think they will, but the water usage, you know, I don't like that crony capitalism. We got enough problems. You know, Nevada, Southern Nevada now, when you open a business, you got to get a permit that justifies your water usage compared to what the benefit you're going to provide in terms of employment and other community benefits. I mean, that's totally antithetical to the Utah way of free market, but I would support moving that direction. It's a resource that we've got to take care of better. Anyway, I don't have a lot of specifics on that, but there's no good there for water usage. And it encroaches on the wetlands. Biologically, it's terrible, besides the usage of the water.
So speaking of lawns and how much water goes into a lawn and stays there and goes nowhere else with no side benefit. Last time I was up at the State House, it was surrounded by acres of green lawn. And it being that leadership by example is a really good leadership style, you probably know where I'm headed with this. What's the possibility of xeriscaping around the State House, leading by example?
That's a lovely and informed question. The Capitol, surprisingly, if you don't go there during the day in the summertime, it's actually used quite intensively as a park, which does not mean you couldn't xeriscape it. The new portions that are going to be on the north side of the Capitol, between the Capitol and the new museum, there is going to be a lot more thought put into water efficiency. But I actually personally walked around the Capitol and picked out some places where I don't think people ever go, and asked some questions about that. And I ran a bill which passed the House and died in the Senate, which said any government building in Utah had to have no more than 20% non-functional turf. If you were building a playground or a park, you could have grass, but if people weren't walking on it to use it, you would have to be limited to 20% for an aesthetic. I thought it should be 0, but we were trying not to be too radical. And it died by about 3 or 4 votes in the Senate on the last night. I'm working on it again. Yeah, it's a painful process. People like that. There are a lot of users, though. If it makes you feel better, if you see a picture of the Capitol and you see acres of grass. But the typical scenario in the summertime on the weekends, that is actually quite a crowded place. But there are spots where it should be, I think, xeriscaped. And that's a lovely idea. Yeah. There's a lot of interest in what I would call the old guard up there in maintaining that feel that it has traditionally. But I think this new landscaping that will go in connection with the new building and the museum, the History Museum, will be a good step. But yeah, there's a lot of really good ideas out there, but it's hard to get them all moved. You know, we're amateur legislators. $30 million budget, but theoretically 7 working weeks to get these problems fixed.
I was just wondering, I spoke with someone who said that with the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill and other bills, that there's a lot of money coming to Utah, like $100 million. And can any of that be applied to addressing water issues here?
So, yes, thank you, Ro. The federal money, $2 billion, Kirsten Sinema got put into the Inflation Reduction Act. 1.6 of that has to be used for the Colorado River Basin. 400 million left for drought relief in the West that's not Colorado Basin. And there's no more worthy project for drought relief in the West than the Great Salt Lake. And the state is pitching that very heavily to get a big chunk of that $400 million. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, and I can't remember the latest on the time limitations. I have seen the letters. I have offered to talk to Kirsten Sinema, who was my mentor when I was running for Congress in 2016 when the DCCC made her my mentor, and she was more of a traditionally understandable Democrat back in those days. But anyway, I've offered my help to work with Democrats, and but I know the state is actively working that issue. I don't know the deadline off the top of my head. I'll check up on that. Yes.
Thanks. What I'm wondering about has to do with current technologies. We obviously know that Israel and other countries are using drip irrigation. I would have thought that by now we've had some sort of a requirement that people in the fruit area can benefit the most from using drip irrigation.
Right. Well, those ag optimization projects, those are capital intensive, and those are the type of things that the ag optimization projects are intended to get to. That's typically not the first step to go to drips. It's typically laser leveling. You can just water the field with less, or there's certain kind of sprinklers that are smart, tied to computer measurements and things like that. But eventually we'll get there. I mean, there are automated alfalfa farms that are a warehouse that are, 1/100th of the size of the field and use 5% of the water and produce the same amount of alfalfa as a ranch did. It's startling what technology can do. We'll get there.
Thank you. I know there was a resolution to have a recommended lake level that failed, and I'm curious what the resistance was to that and whether or not, kind of why that was such a problem.
I think that was the Senate trying to teach a lesson to the senator who ran the bill. Nate Bluen is a wonderful conservation environment. Well, there's a lot of history there, but it was a good measure. The governor even said he would support a goal. What I think there is a trigger, which is a salinity level for curtailing the mineral extraction. But Senator Bluen ran a resolution to make 4,200 a goal for the state, and it should have passed, but the Senate killed it. It countered a lot of animosity because it came on the heels of a incident that blew up over trans rights. You don't want to hear all the detail. It's sad, and it shouldn't have been personally oriented. I think that was part of it, and part of it was they didn't like the idea of a goal standing out there without an action to move toward the goal. So, yeah. Rabbi, you need to give me the high sign when we're going to quit, right?
I see two more questions, Helene and Faye, who, by the way, I just want to give a shout out to because Helene is our representative on the Great Salt Lake, what's it called? The Interfaith Action Coalition, preserving the Great Salt Lake, and Faye's the chair of our Adult Education Committee, and see Matthew is the chair of our Social Action, Social Justice. So those three alongside Helene really help put this thing together. So Faye and Helene, you get the last two questions. Otherwise, we'll gladly keep you here all night.
Thank you so much for being here today. It was a great talk so far. I have one point and one question. One of the things, Vivian, since you brought up the whole issue about the parks and around the Capitol and all the other parks, one of the things that Israel does is they actually do have parks. And what they do, because they have excess water, they use wastewater reclamation to water the parks. So I don't know if that's possible. I know you said that it's a problem, at least for right now, in terms of agriculture, but maybe that's a possibility to look in certain areas to help save some water. But my question that I have is, I think we all read in the newspaper recently that we have a semiconductor plant that's going to come down in Lehigh shortly. And semiconductor plants use a great deal of water. I don't know if that comes from that's going to come from the Great Salt Lake, from other areas, Utah, I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that and what expectations they have for using water wisely?
Yeah, well, this goes back to where we... Well, yes, well, I don't like subsidies being offered to businesses to move. I think they ought to come here for other reasons. I don't like that kind of deal making that goes on to incentivize companies to move here. They were incentivized to come here. But this goes back to what they're doing in Nevada, in Las Vegas. They make the business submit a permit application for how much water they're going to use and justify that usage, and maybe they have to go buy out another business that's less efficient to acquire the water right and so forth. And I think that's a healthy exercise, but I'm in a small minority who thinks that way. And so there's no comprehensive plan for addressing that situation. It's first come, first serve. If you come and you can get the water, yeah, that will come out of the Great Salt Lake, because it's anything on the Wasatch Front, Brigham City, the Wasatch Back, all the Wasatch Front drains to and Tooele all drains to the Great Salt Lake. So yeah, that comes out of the Great Salt Lake.
First of all, thank you for being on the caucus for the Great Salt Lake, as well as the co-chair. And you're walking the walk, you're doing the homework, and we all appreciate that, and for you being here tonight. Just two questions. A quick one is, it seems like we can never get stronger building codes done, not only for air quality, but for low-flow showers, low-flow toilets, where other states have done this, and we're a drought state. So why can't any of that get through, other than the normal answer, we have a lot of realtors and developers in the legislature. And my other question is, what can we do to get the fire going as a populace here, the people who aren't as dedicated as doing the work and understanding what's going on? How can we reach these people that this is important to all of us? It's a common denominator. We drink water. We all breathe the same air. Before the legislature starts, during the legislature, what can we do to get people who aren't on board, and to say how important it is?
Those are killer important questions. You know, you don't want to hear the usual answer, but it's the usual answer. Nationally, 1 in 10 legislators is a realtor or a developer. In Utah, 1 in 4. And you know, that's good, and that's not good in some ways. It's really good in some others, and I'll tell you how I think we can solve your second question. So we did do low-flow shower heads and taps. We did not do low-flow toilets. There was just a few people who were just not totally resistant to that idea. But to me, that's a secondary issue because of what I mentioned about that indoor water usage. Really, there's a running joke, you know, flush twice and send your blessings to the Great Salt Lake, because that water goes to the lake. And when I'm feeling kind of subversive, I want to tell people, don't water your grass, and take the same quantity of water, put it in your tub and drain it and send it to the Great Salt Lake, because you will send your water, your sewage goes to the Great Salt Lake. Why that's not a good idea, for the record, is that we have to then go exploit water resources to give you culinary water, right? So we don't want to have to expand to dam the Bear River to supply culinary water. But really, for immediate help to the lake, you should turn on your tap. We should take the water out of the reservoirs where their water managers want to keep it so they can give us water to brush our teeth, and we should store more of it in the lake. But we have these old style scarcity state of mind, which is real. So we have to fight that. So why is this not a greater upswelling of public interest and support? I think it is. It has been. It's faded, you know, and I could give you indicia of that. I won't bore you. But it has faded. 2 years ago, it was a much bigger issue. And out of sight, out of mind. It's a chronic issue with our voters who are busy with other parts of their lives and don't have the attention to give it. Somebody called it, it's not a windshield issue. The #1 spending priority in Utah is roads, because $2 billion a year on roads in Utah. And that's because people are looking at the roads all day long, you know, and they know when they're in a traffic jam and it ticks them off. Water is not a windshield issue. They don't turn on the tap and it doesn't work. It always works in Utah. And it might be a healthy thing if we had a timeout day where people, you know, it was a surprise whether your water would come on or not. To raise awareness, it's not a foregone conclusion that we're going to have it. But it's just a hard thing. It's a chronic issue, you know, all these democracy issues and education and air quality. It's our voters who are trusting leaders that they maybe shouldn't always trust. Well, you get to support people like me, but I think writing, and when you're a constituent, your legislator will pay attention to that. If you say, I live at this address and you are my representative, you are my senator. By the way, that was our Senator Janie Iwamoto who did those indoor water plumbing. She was even giving out sugar cookies shaped like toilets to try to get votes for that. She was a wonderful representative, and I am mad at her to this day for retiring. But that is probably the only email they pay attention to. People, I want to know if my constituent writes me, and I try to get back to them. That's very important. And so I wish I had the recipe. I am trying to enlist the realtors to understand your property values are going to plummet if this exposed lake bed gets bad. If we let it get bad, our real estate values on the Wasatch Front are going to go into the toilet, and so that's a very powerful lobby that I have been trying to wake up, and there are other people working with me on that. So we want to get those vested economic interests where they align with these conservation values to get to advocate. Sorry, Rabbi.
No, you're good. You're good. I just wanted to hear you. Thank you. So I'm pretty sure, by the way, of that $2 billion for roads, about half of that goes to Sugar House, right? That's what it feels like. Thank you all so much for staying. Like I said, Representative Vela, I just want to be sensitive to you because we could keep you here for a couple more hours, I think, asking questions. This is an issue of great concern for us, and we are so grateful for everything that you're doing to try and save the Great Salt Lake, which is also going to save our town and our lives too. So thank you for that, and just and thank you so much for spending your Friday evening with us. I thought I knew a good bit about what was going on. I've learned so much tonight, and one, how devastating it will be for many reasons if we lose this lake, but two, how much you're doing and what we can be doing to help save it. So please join me in thanking Representative Owens, our legislator who's here for over Mill Creek and over the synagogue as well. We're really appreciative of all you do for our community. Thank you, and thank you to you all. Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and let's go be partners with God in creation and fix this lake. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did take a picture of Rachel. Sure. Plaque to send to her son.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.